Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for battling through the weather to join us this afternoon in the Mona Library in person and online this afternoon to a sit-down session with a very creative and interesting afternoon as we explore, as the topic said, my lived journey, a conversation with UWI scholars. And these are just a sample taken from the UWI scholars. This year, 2023, marked our 8th Library Open Week, and this is another fresh and groundbreaking aspect of our Library Open Week, and we want to align it with the 75th anniversary, which our theme is Triumph Research Scholarship at the Mona campus. We thought it would be fitting to engage our very own scholars here at Mona. This esteemed panel was therefore conceived as one of the Library Open Week events. We anticipate by the end of this afternoon, we'll have gained insight into their journey and their best strategy as they incorporate in our own academic pursuit. I now welcome Ms. Christine Randall, Director of UWI Press, that has been a beacon for the campus as a publishing powerhouse. Who will be our moderator guiding us through this proceedings? Good afternoon. Ms. Randall.
Good afternoon. Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to you all. Welcome to Carolyn, who is online, my compadre in femininity this afternoon, because I'm here with the three gentlemen, so it's good to know that Carolyn is online. Thank you to the library for considering me and asking me to moderate this panel. Let me just mea culpa here at the very beginning. I've never done anything like this before. So please forgive the missteps. Please forgive the breaks in protocol, because they are going to happen, right? Ladies and gentlemen, as our MC said, we have an esteemed panel joining us this afternoon. This is the latest in a series of 75th anniversary events being celebrated by the University of the West Indies. And here at the Mona campus, this is the UWI Library is celebrating Library Open Week this week. So it's wonderful that we are here. You know, in the Caribbean, as he said, the university stands as really a bastion and a beacon of the independence project, the decolonization project, and the scholars that we have here this evening have all played their part by their work, their research, and their lived experiences in not only contributing to the scholarship of the university, but the life of the Caribbean generally. So this afternoon, we welcome, and I will start with the youngest, and I'm going to severely break protocol by telling you that it's his birthday this afternoon, today, and we wish him a very happy birthday. I'm speaking of Stanley Griffin, who is the Deputy Dean of Undergraduate Matters and Senior Lecturer in Archival and Information Studies in the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Department of Library and Information Studies at the UWI, here, Mona campus. His research interests include multiculturalism in Antigua and the Eastern Caribbean, the cultural dynamics of intra-Caribbean migrations, archives in the constructs of Caribbean culture, and community archives in the Caribbean. He is a published author, and his most recent publications include Decolonizing the Caribbean Record, an Archives Reader in 2018, and Archiving Caribbean Identity, Records, Community, and Memory in 2020. He is also the author of several journal articles and is a member of the editorial board of the International Journal of Information, Diversity, and Inclusion. Stanley Griffin, ladies and gentlemen. Is Sasika online with us? Is she with us as yet? Okay. So just to keep the balance going, I will move to Professor Carolyn Cooper, who joins us online. She is the author of two influential books, Noises in the Blood, Orality, Gender, and the Vulgar Body of Jamaican Popular Culture, and Sound Clash, Jamaican Dancehall Culture at Large. She's also co-editor of Bob Marley, The Man and His Music, and editor of Global Reggae. She's currently editing the Bob Marley Lectures, the proceedings of an engaging lecture series on Jamaican popular music, which she initiated in 1997 as coordinator of the Reggae Studies Unit at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Professor Cooper writes a weekly column for the Sunday Gleaner that she posts in her bilingual blog, Jamaican Woman Tongue. She has appeared in numerous documentaries on Caribbean culture produced by a wide range of local and international media houses. For her outstanding work in the field of education, Professor Cooper was awarded the National Honor of Jamaica, the Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander, and that was 10 years ago in 2013. So we continue the heritage celebrations with Professor Cooper, CD. Moving on to the gentleman here on my left, who is Dr. Rupert Lewis. He is also Professor Emeritus of Political Thought in the Department of Government, University of the West Indies, Jamaica, and has served as Research Fellow in the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Advocacy at UWI. He has earned an international reputation as a scholar of the Garvey movement. In 2018, his biography of Marcus Garvey was published by the UWI Press, Caribbean Biography Series, and his biography of Walter Rodney is forthcoming. He is the author of Walter Rodney's Intellectual and Political Thought, and has edited books on George Padmore, the Trinidad-born Pan-Africanist, and Richard Hart, the Jamaican Marxist. He's a member of Jamaica's National Council on Reparation and no stranger to any of us. And last but not least, a gentleman who made me very nervous to participate this afternoon, Mr. Carrimack himself, Dr. Livingston White, who is senior lecturer and currently director of the Caribbean School of Media and Communication department here at the University of the West Indies, Mona, where he teaches in communication analysis and planning, social marketing, health communication, and communication research methodology, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. Since 2021, he has been serving as a public orator for the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. He is an author, having co-authored with Yvette Rowe the book Still on Air, Producing Television in Small Markets. And he has worked in various roles in television production with the CPTC, Creative Production and Training Center, and the Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, former national television station in Jamaica. Dr. White has served on several and various boards and committees, including being a current member of the Board of Directors for the Creative Production and Training Center here in Kingston, Jamaica. He's also a member of the editorial boards of the Social Marketing Quarterly and Health Marketing Quarterly journals, as well as a member of the International Communication Association and the International Association of Media and Communication Research. Are we going to be joined by Sasika? Oh, she's on her way. So I will do her introduction also, if I can find my little piece of paper here. Forgive me. Here we go. Dr. Harris is senior librarian. So how's she late? And she's senior librarian here at the library where we are seated this afternoon. She heads, well, you'll soon hear why. She's a very busy lady. She heads the Science and Engineering branch library, providing STEM research support to the Faculty of Science and Technology. She's also a senior adjunct lecturer in the Faculty of Science and Technology here at the University of the West Indies, and a former adjunct lecturer in the Department of Library and Information Studies. With over 30 publications in local and international journals, and the recipient of the Library and Information Association of Jamaica Award for Research and Publication, the UWI Mona Principals Award for Outstanding Researcher, and for the past 3 years and one previously, the recipient of the Mona Principals Award for Best Research Publication. So we forgive her, she's a very busy lady. Since 2007, Dr. Harris has served in various capacities with the Library and Information Association of Jamaica And of note is her contribution as chief editor for the 3 most recently published volumes of the LIAJA Journal. She remains the chief editor, and she is the founder of the University of the West Indies Library and Information Student Society. So ladies and gentlemen, that is our panel this afternoon. I'm glad to see that our numbers have increased, and I hope they are increasing online as well. We are here to have a discussion, a conversation. In a way, you can almost forget that you have the audience. Let us just have a chat, right? What I'm interested in for myself, and I'll ask each of you to answer. What was happening at the time when you entered UWI? And why did you choose to study what you studied? And how did it evolve and lead you on the path where you are today? I'll start with you, Professor Lewis. So what was happening? Tell us the general time. You don't have to remember the year, but the general time and what was happening.
Do I use this? This mic is working? Yes. Fine, good. Yeah, okay, the general time. I entered UA in 1965, coming straight from high school, Calabar High School. And the library was the center of attraction for me because it was relatively new, really well staffed, and well resourced. And you know, if you come from a high school where your library is one room and you can count the books, to come into the library was, for me, a very positive moment. I mean, like many other students, we lived in the library. What was happening at the time? 3 years independence, so we're pretty young. Decolonization was at the heart of all that we were concerned with. Our staff had come from a variety of countries, Sri Lanka, Professor Archie Singham, Gladstone Mills, the founder of the department, was a distinguished civil service. And the Department of Government at the time was responsible for training civil servants throughout the Caribbean area. So the campus was a regional campus from Antigua, Barbados, Guyana, Turks and Caicos, Belize, what have you. Genuine regional campus. Trinidad and Tobago, of course. And the issue which was uppermost in people's minds how was the Caribbean to be organized in the period of independence? How best to set about restructuring? And UWI was critical in this because this was where the training was that had started with medicine. In the 60s, there was no question of graduate unemployment. Everybody would be allocated to some place in the Caribbean where they would work because there was a big expansion of the public sector. So literally, when employers came on the campus from the private sector, in the assembly hall, you had your pick of places that you'd work. I had gotten 2 scholarships to come to UWI. I got a Royal Bank of Canada scholarship. So I was being prepared for banking. However, I then got the Jamaica Independence Scholarship. And I chose Jamaica Independence. And I chose political science. Because political science, constitution making, the structure, how we should organize ourselves, particularly in the period after the failure of the federal idea. Jamaica voted to pull out of federation. Jamaica was at the time the most prosperous West Indian island. And Bustamante said he didn't want to take on these poor, small islands. Of course, the British did not provide the requisite financial support. So the responsibility for the failure of the Federation in large measure is a financial one. So this was the climate, a climate of great optimism, a climate when our writers were coming into their own, that generation of writers, George Lamming, Roger Mays, who by that time had passed from cancer, but who still resonated with us. Vidyanai Paul, Edgar Mitterholzer, Andrew Solke, Sylvia Winter. It was, in my view, an amazing time to be alive.
And you were definitely influenced by what was happening around you.
Absolutely.
Taking the path that you did. Thank you, Professor. I'm going to move on to Dr. Livingston and ask the same question, but in a different vein. Because Professor Lewis went on to study political science, yes? Which does not necessarily have a defined career path. But for yourself and the institute that you are head of, I feel that most of our students who enter that institute are assured, self-assured of a job at the end of it. I don't know that we have these employers coming in and looking around as Professor, or engaging as Professor Lewis said, but give us a little background on your entry to UWI and your career path as well, if you could.
Thank you. So I started studying at UWI in 1993. 94, graduated in 97, and that year 1997 was an interesting year for media. It was the year that JBC became privatized and ownership went over to RJR. There was a liberalization of the media market. There was a legalization of the cable industry. The Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica at the time wanted to know what can we do to facilitate more local productions in television. So you can see how that era naturally led to my writing a book on producing television in Jamaica. So the research for that book, which came out in 2018, started from as far back as 1997. So for my master's, I looked at the imperatives, the development imperatives for local television production. And this was because there was a need for research on local production, indigenous production, but also the liberalization of the media market, the privatization of media stations, media entities. CVM TV had started in 93. So now there was a push to really get more local productions, and the cable channels would have provided more opportunity for local productions. So there was a need for that research.
Okay.
But on the other side of this, there was also the HIV epidemic going on. And at the time in my department, I know Marion de Brun was doing research on communication strategies, which also got me involved in health communication research, looking at messaging for HIV. And there was lots of funding to fund campaigns. Those campaigns had to be tested and so on. So I got involved in that type of research. So I was almost 2 tracks, doing television production work, but also doing research on HIV messaging with Marion de Brun. And that led to the work I did for my PhD in health communication and evaluating communication campaigns. But to answer your question about students getting jobs, the way the curriculum has developed, we do in the Faculty of Humanities and Education, we push entrepreneurship. So many of these students also create their own jobs. So yes, there are jobs available for them in the media sector and also in communication departments of many organizations. But many of our students are also entrepreneurs who offer services in media and communication to various clients.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Livingston White. Professor Cooper, over to you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm now hearing you.
Okay, wonderful.
Pity, I'm looking like a duppy. Pity, I'm looking like a duppy, but it's all right. My spirit is there.
You're not looking like any duppy. Beautiful as usual. Thank you so much for joining us. So the same question for you.
Yes.
The same question. What was happening at the time when you joined?
I came on campus. I came on campus in 1968. Pure excitement. I came on October, and the next week I was out on the street demonstrating because Walter Rodney had been stopped from coming back into the island after he had gone to the conference, Black Writers Conference in Montreal. So for me, I use the word excitement because I really didn't know anything much about the politics, but the meeting to decide what we're going to do about Rodney was held in the dining room of Mary C. Cole Hall, where I was a resident. And of course, I had to go. So I was out on the street. And for me, that moment was defining because it is a marker of Black power. Black power had hit the Caribbean. I came on campus in October with my hair straightened. And by the end of the Christmas holiday, I came back on campus with an afro, So it was really a moment where we were thinking about identity, thinking about who we wanted to be, what our society should be like. And I would say that that moment defined my career. I came on campus and I studied literature. Some of the same people that Professor Lewis just talked about, all of them engaged with questions of identity and who we were in the Caribbean. And from there, I went on to do a PhD at the University of Toronto on Derek Walcott. And in looking at Walcott, I realized that he had this kind of conflict between the folk and the so-called intellectual, between the Creole and English, and that sensibility. He was struggling to pull together all aspects of his upbringing in St. Lucia. And he had a wonderful essay in the introduction to his plays, Dream on Monkey Mountain, What the Twilight Says, where he talks about himself sitting on the veranda with his back to the street, hearing the rhythms of the street, the Salvation Army parodies, the language of the street. His back is to the street, and he's sitting down trying to create these epic poems in English. And I think that represents for me the kind of conflict that many Caribbean intellectuals faced. And when I came home from teaching in the US and being a graduate student, I decided I wanted to spend my time writing about Black people's literature because I said there are enough white people writing about for them literature. I say why we must spend my time on them. And then when I started to look at the scholarship on our literature, most of it was on the scribal end of the continuum. And I decided to look at the oral. And so I studied Miss Lou and Sistine Theatre Collective and, a whole set of oral texts and brought them in conversation with the scribal tradition. And that is how my first book emerged, Noises in the Blood, published 30 years ago and still going strong.
Wonderful. Congratulations. Thank you, Professor Cooper. And Stanley, as should I venture to say, the youngest, I might get myself in trouble, but tell me what, from a layperson's point of view, being myself, what is it that drives a scholar, a student, to become an academic, to seek that as a career path, to eventually lead to a teaching within the institution? Can you say, using your own entry into the university and your own study and experience?
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that question phrased that way, because first, I'm a Caveite. I did my entire academic beginnings at the Caveville campus. And secondly, I can recall in Professor Mayo, John Mayo's class in history, my undergrad starts in history, he asked us in a tutorial who wants to be an academic, and nobody raised their hands because, and he again stressed that, there's a need for Caribbean people to be the ones thinking and writing about ourselves. And everybody was like, okay, right, but not me. And so my academic life really came out of just being at the right place in the right time and having opportunities to observe growth and challenges in Caribbean society. So long story short, I grew up in a context where my parents moved every 3 years to, around the Caribbean, and in order to, even just to survive and get friends and get good grades, you had to learn, you had to recognize details about society and so forth. And so in the undergraduate level at Cave Hill, I did all the Caribbean-oriented history courses and languages. I did Spanish as an undergraduate. I did Caribbean history, Latin American history, Spanish Caribbean history, and so on and so forth. And at the end of that, I also recognized, I did my first year in Antigua as a distance student at the State College there. And I recognized that the area that my mother's family lived in St. John's, which was being transformed by the presence of migrants from the Dominican Republic. And it was interesting because every time we went to Antigua for vacation, that particular area at the time had different voices. So it was working Antigua, the lower middle class people, very community oriented area in St. John's, but at each visit there were different voices. So when migrants from Jamaica came to Antigua, that was the first landing spot. So there were Jamaican voices, and then the voices changed a few years later to persons from Dominica, the Rizal and Commonwealth of Dominica. So there were French accent voices, and then Guadeloupans and so forth. And then by the late 1990s, early 2000s, folks speaking Spanish from the Dominican Republic. And so, one of the issues, in terms of my own academic interests then, is why all these people showing up in Antigua, one, and why are they all claiming Antiguan citizenship? And so my PhD in cultural studies, I was in the first cohort for the cultural studies discipline at Cave Hill, focused on the formation of identity, space, and nationhood in Antigua for these migrants, particularly from the Dominican Republic, given that whole historical connection between not just Antigua, but the Leeward Islands as a colony and as a movement space between the two territories. So that's one. But one thing happened at the same time. While I was an MPhil student, it so happened that the newly appointed, I refer to her as a campus archivist, was also completing her heritage studies degree, and she was taking a course in cultural studies as an elective with me. And we sat in the same classroom. I saw her looking at me strangely, and I was like, well, this woman watching me so. And long story short, she asked me to support her as a student assistant in the archives. And so that was my entry then into another sphere and another discipline that I never thought of. Mind you, at the undergraduate level at Cave Hill, we had two streams. You had the stream that would lead you to do the Caribbean Studies paper, and there was a practical history stream where we went to cemeteries, churchyards, plantation houses. We did a bit of archaeology. And so that was courses that led into historical research. And part of that historical research course meant that we went to the archives to investigate how we do, the starting point of writing history. And so that visit to the archives piqued an interest in archival research, and the job as a student assistant in the campus archives piqued an interest in an archival career. And so one thing led to the other. So the archival career was supposed to pay the bills, while the cultural studies research interest was really just to build out on my passion for Caribbean people, Caribbean history, Caribbean culture. And so that's how both things happened at the same time.
Well, that gives us now a full explanation of your CV. Thank you so much, Tanya, and the Antigua connection and so on. But you know what I'm particularly interested in? How does one, or what has led each of you into teaching? Because is it the fact of your research? Is it to pay the bills? Is it an offer that presented itself or an opportunity that presented itself? Was it the next thing, natural thing to do? I'm interested, and I'm throwing that out to all of you. Whoever would like to answer can answer. What led you into teaching?
Well, what led me to teaching was that Professor Gladstone Mills, founding head of the department, invited me to join the department. I didn't apply to become a member. I was invited.
And the rest is history.
No, the rest is not history. And he also invited me to co-edit the second edition of the book, Readings in Government and Policy of the West Indies. So I went to the Institute of Social and Economic Research in probably 1970, as a graduate student, and did most of the work of the book which I edited with Trevor Monroe. So this is a time when staff is being identified. And my wife, Professor Maureen Warner-Lewis, was recruited from Nigeria. So it's a moment of being spotted, being rewarded with scholarships, and being given a job. So I have never applied for a job. I've applied for fellowships and gotten fellowships. So I love teaching. I love the idea of new cohorts of students coming in. And I don't necessarily like those students who think they are bright or who have passed a lot of subjects and they're coming from high school feeling that they're good. You pick up part of the thing in teaching is your ability to interface with students who do not realize don't know their potential. They don't know what they are capable of. Or who have, as a result of high school experience, have a lot of insecurities. So I enjoy teaching not simply as the delivery of material, but the engagement with the individual.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I think you make a critical point. From a student perspective, well, you made it twice, actually. You were spotted, and in turn, you are also able to spot those who may think they do not stand out, but do stand out, in fact. Perhaps not academically, but in some other respect. Dr. White, you wanted to share with us? Professor Carolyn?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, and I can
Go
come
ahead.
in. I can come in. My mother was a primary school teacher, so my fate was sealed from early. I was going to be just like her. But because of the access I had to university education up to the PhD, which she didn't have, she went to Teachers College. I knew that I was going to teach at university level. So to me, teaching, like as Rupert says, is a wonderful opportunity to help young people grow. And one of my favorite courses that I taught at UWI was reggae poetry. You know, a lot of people say reggae poetry, no pure foolishness that, but I knew that there was more to reggae poetry than the average person might see. And one of the questions I used to ask at the end of the course, not just about doing your research paper and taking the exam, I would ask students, so what you really learn? And it was interesting to get the responses. One of them said one year, I didn't know it was so deep. I didn't know that there was so much that I could get out of these song lyrics. Another one said, I would never listen to reggae the same anymore. And in fact, one of the tutors, Tanya Shirley, who's a brilliant poet, when I finished teaching the song, I've got to go back home. And I looked at the notions of diaspora and so on that were embedded in the song. She said, I had listened to this song so often, I had danced it so often, and yet I never recognized that element of connecting between Africa and the diaspora. So it's to me, teaching is a wonderful opportunity to share knowledge, but to help young people come to understand things for themselves. I've got to go back.
Yes, of course.
Well, for me, a job was advertised, and upon completing my master's degree in communication research and theory at Florida State University on a Fulbright scholarship, I applied for that job. and got it and started working here in 2001. But before that, I had an interest in research methodology. Professor Hopton Dunn taught me research methods at the undergraduate level. I clearly had a passion for it. Everybody used to come to me and ask me to help them with their research papers and their various research methodology designs for their thesis papers. And so we did the project for Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica. So now I wanted to learn more about research methods, albeit it was about television production. And so I got the job and started teaching research methodology. I thought I would have been teaching in television production, but I also got to teach classes in social marketing and health communication, given my work on public communication campaigns about HIV and AIDS. So that's how I got involved in teaching.
That's lovely. You know what I have gotten from what the three of you have said so far is that it's the passion behind it. The passion not only for the research that you are doing or your own interest, but for passing that knowledge on and the importance of that and the importance of teaching itself as a profession. Sandy, you wanted to add?
Yes, well, at KFL at the time, as grad students, teaching was seen as part of your development. So I can't recall any of the postgraduate, MPhil PhDs not tutoring, having a tutorial. We were all assigned tutorials, and we were all paired with MA candidates. So a lot of the supervision experience that I currently have is because I had a group of MAs that I was supervising, not knowing that I was supervising. And again, the context, we were first offering in cultural studies with one lecturer, having all these MPhils, there are like 5 MPhil PhDs, 20 MAs. UWI, you start a program big without resources, right? And so the MPhil candidates were seen as major supporters to the lecturer. And so even before that, as a young MPhil, I was a part of Carib Civ. I had a tutorial. And so a group of undergraduates, working through Caribbean history, Caribbean culture, Caribbean politics. And so teaching became part of the mechanism for appreciating research, developing your own delivery skills, developing your own thinking, critical thinking, and research skills. And it was seen as part of the mentorship growth of the MPhil PhD candidate. So it was part and parcel of the, your MPhil candidate is supposed to be doing some form of teaching or tutorial work. So that's how I...
Well, that's wonderful. That's something that was compulsory. Has become
unwritten
compulsory, but became a passion. And all of you have spoken about someone in particular who has mentored you, whether directly or indirectly, or who you were influenced by. And I think it's important for all of us, but students in particular, to realize that there is and should be someone, hopefully someone within your discipline and your field that you are trying to follow in their footsteps, at least their leadership footsteps. So thank you so much for that. Professor Rupert, you mentioned your lovely wife, Dr. Maureen Warner-Lewis, and I wonder, it segues into another question, a little off, but connected. Especially since you are both academics, both researchers, how has your work impacted family life? Has there been a strain at any time? Has it been enhanced? How have you managed to balance the personal and the professional?
That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. Being two academics, and given the demands of being a university person, research, teaching, bringing a family, I have to admit that Maureen took the bulk of the burden in the early years. For a particular reason, I was politically active. I was not simply a academic. I was active in the Walter Rodney demonstrations. I was involved with the Black Power group on campus. Of course, this was before I got married. But that segued into the Abeng group, which was a group that came out of the Rodney movement in 1969. The Abeng group, we were involved also in organizing workers on campus in the University and Allied Workers Union. That led into Marxism. I was a founding member of the Workers' Party of Jamaica. So up until into the 1980s. So if you include the political activism, I would have to admit that Maureen shouldered the bulk of the familia. I played my part, but the fact is that she shouldered a good bit of it, because if you did, I edited the newspaper Struggle, and my schedule, when that paper was to come out, put that paper to bed, as we said. It was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I have a 9 o'clock lecture. So it was pretty rough, not to speak of political dangers. That's another aspect,
right, absolutely,
which was,
at that
of
time.
course, of concern to her, but I won't, and to me as well. So, however, we have a lot of things in common in terms of our Afrocentric research. So we communicate well, we collaborate. She has co-edited one of the Garvey books with me. We work on joint articles. She is by far the better scholar in the family and the most prolific.
Well, thank you for saying that publicly.
So it's even in retirement now, it's a work in progress as we come to the end of our careers. She has written a memoir, which I'm glad that she has done, where you can actually reflect not only on her life, but her family and our family. So it continues to be a great experience.
So the point is, for women, academia is no different. You still have 2, 3 jobs that you're doing, balancing family life, because as Professor Rupert has freely admitted, it is Professor Maureen who bore the brunt of the family support. I share a joke with you. A few years ago, a colleague was visiting my office and said, "Oh, Christine, you must come to such and such conference next week." I said, "Listen, first of all, I have a day job where I have to run the office, but I have the house, the husband, the dog, the helper, the son, and it just does not happen like that. It takes a lot of planning." So academia and scholarship and being a scholar is no different from any other profession, and the burdens that are experienced particularly by women. At this juncture, again, to segue now, I would like to welcome Dr. Sasika Harris, who has joined us. I did introduce her, so we'll forego all of that now, because we all know who you are. And I would like to ask, you have an interesting career trajectory as not only an information specialist, but an information specialist in STEM. And as a woman in STEM, how did your career path develop? So how did you enter UWI? How did you become employed at UWI? And how did you get into that particular field? Just forgive us a moment as Dr. Harris makes her way to she's a bit impaired.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, thank you. Yes, I know that was a whole lot of questions, but an information specialist and a woman in STEM.
All right, so how did I get here? So, group of friends in college, it was time to sign up for university. So we all signed up. I came to university. I think I just kind of went along with what my friends were signing up. In fact, I had them complete the form for me. Anyways, I heard I got into the university. I came, I did my first degree in language education, English language and literature. And then I decided now that I definitely need to do my master's and doctorate. I needed to do all of that before anything else. But then, when it was time for me to do my master's, I did the first degree in education, so I wanted to do the second degree in education too. The person who was in charge of the department at the time said, Cecilia, I don't think you want to do any master's in education because I see you and it doesn't pay a lot of money and I know you don't want to be in that profession. So tell you what, you go and work for a year and come back and I will let you in the program. And I said, you know, nobody's going to control my life like that. I want to do my master's and everything because I have seen where persons take a break, they have family and they don't re-enter education. So I said, well, I am going to find another program, another master's to do. And I remember my friends were going into librarianship for first degree. And of course I was like, where are you studying librarianship? What is there in librarianship to study? But anyways, I decided I was going to go try it because they seemed to were doing well and they had gotten some awards and stuff. And one of them decided to go into law. So I went over to library school because I said, you know, I'm going to speak to the person in charge and then I am going to apply. And if that person says no, I'll just go to another department. So I went, had my conversation, got my overview, and I put in my application and I was accepted. So I got into librarianship by accident. Yes, so that is how I got here.
Wonderful. We've all been hearing this afternoon about the various and differing modes of entry to what has become a passion. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask Professor Cooper a little controversial question here, moving on from Sasika. As a woman entering the university in the 60s and having served with the university for several decades, how have you found your collaboration and collegiality with your counterparts, specifically your male counterparts? And have you found that there has been any real or any perceived bias or favoritism or dare I use a strong word, victimization? What has your experience as a woman within the UWI system, as a student and a scholar, how has that been? Can you share that with us?
Well, I'm a very strong-willed person, so it's not so easy to victimize me. I know how to stand up for myself. But I must say that as a lecturer in the Department of Literatures in English, which was formerly English, I was fortunate to be in a very collegial atmosphere. Our department never had no contention. You would hear about war and strife in other departments. We had nothing like that in Literatures in English. The men in the department, Professor Bob, Professor Mervyn Morris, were very supportive. And maybe it's because they were poets and their sensibility was very sophisticated. But they were very supportive of us as women in the department. So I would not say that I've had any challenges in the university around gender issues. No, I did apply for a job as the director for the Institute for Gender Development Studies. I thought I was the best prepared candidate. I didn't get the job. So I wrote the vice chancellor to ask him why I didn't get the job. You know, most people don't get a job, you just quail up. So I just wrote him and said, particularly since the position is about interrogation of patriarchy, please do not tell me that you don't have to give me any answer. Well, I was quite embarrassed by the answer he gave, and I should make it clear that it is not the current vice chancellor, it is Professor Nigel Harris. He wrote one bogus letter about how he has applied for a job and didn't get it, and he just brushed off himself and moved on. And you know, I was so distressed by his response that I didn't bother to answer him, because you know, it was clear that despite the fact that I was qualified for the job, it appears as though there was another candidate. In fact, quite informally, I met one of the people on the committee who interviewed, and I was walking and she on the ring road. She stopped. She said, "Oh no, I don't know how you didn't get the job." You know, and I said, "It's okay, man. You know, sometimes things that you want, you don't really need." And the campus principal at the time said to me once, "Carolyn, you know, I never really want that job." But I felt on principle that I should have applied for it because I was the most qualified. So I feel that there are moments in the university where other factors other than qualifications matter, which is what the vice chancellor said to me in this letter. I must remember that sometimes there are other factors. Now, what can these other factors be? Perhaps people see as a contentious person, but in order to really create, you have to be the kind of person who will challenge the system and so on. So, you know, if people don't want somebody who challenges the system, especially a center that is going to talk about gender politics, you need to have a dynamic person who is willing to take on the system. And sometimes people, even academics that you think you would expect to be willing to challenge the system, they are not willing to do that. They just want to roll along and, you know, keep things the way they are. So we have these grand sounding institutions, but sometimes they're not really doing much. And, you know, you said it was a controversial question and you get a controversial answer.
As expected. Thank you very much, Professor Carolyn. So I want to allow some time for questions to come through. So I'm going to wrap up the sort of conversation part of the forum this afternoon and ask you each to just close with remembering where we are, the moment we are in, and what we are celebrating and striving towards. I want each of you to just give me a few, or give us rather, a few parting words, whether it is for all of us, whether it is for grad students, whether it is for your colleagues on UWI at 75. Stanley, I'll start with you.
Good question, and very good question, because over the last few weeks I've been thinking about the Five Islands campus, Antigua, where, you know, the newest campus in an area of my academic interest. And I juxtapose what's happening at the Five Island campus with what was the purposes of the UWI in the Irving Report of the 1940s. A university for the Caribbean, focused on Caribbean issues by Caribbean people. I don't think we ought to lose sight of that. I think while the pressures of life in our context is about economic preparedness and job readiness and so forth, the idea of studying our context, knowing our context, appreciating our history, appreciating the ways that we are, to be being done by Caribbean people for Caribbean societies cannot be neglected. And when I think of what is now the Five Island campus versus the purposes of a university as stipulated by the Irving Report in the 1940s, in a very real sense, as advanced as we are now as Caribbean societies, that Irving Report about a possible university of the West Indies still stands. And we ought not to be swayed by the money realities that, you know, are shaping how we do things now. We were always supposed to be a university of the West Indies, preparing West Indians to look after, care for, examine ourselves. May we never lose that.
So always relying on going back to the foundations of UWI. Dr. Livingston White, same question for you.
So as I sit here thinking about my 22 years on the campus out of the 75 years of UWI, I think our scholarship needs to respond to, developing the Caribbean. There's always a development ethos that we teach at CARIMAC, the role of media in national development, in regional development. And just to be able to document our experiences, when we think about the vision of the university to become an excellent global university rooted in the Caribbean, it's to get to that point where we can tell our own stories and document our experiences in positive ways that can empower our Caribbean people.
Absolutely. And the UWI Press stands ready to serve that purpose as well. Sasika?
Well, for me, I'll say, make sure you chart your path. So know what it is that you want and go for it. Forget about the noise around, the thunder, the storm, everything, and you continue pressing ahead. And as the word says, looking towards the mark and forgetting everything else. Yeah.
And I think UWI is one of the perfect places to foster that, becoming, which has been the experience of all of us here this afternoon, becoming who you were meant to be, and the university helping to foster that.
Yes.
So, you're saying shut out the noise and so on. That's wonderful. Professor Rupert Lewis?
Yes, the regional character of the university, I think we have failed to sustain its regional nature, largely in relationship to the public investment. So the territories then support their campuses so that weak economies translate into lower public investment in education. So I'd like to see greater collaboration. I think whilst we promote the external rankings that we get, and that's important, we ought to develop our own internal assessment of how we rank. What is the nature of our contribution to the region and to the society? In other words, we have to develop more self-confidence in how we judge ourselves. And finally, computing is one of the fastest growing departments on this campus. And technology is changing knowledge production. And therefore, the 21st century university has to be reconfigured in relationship to the fourth and fifth industrial revolution. There's no way of avoiding that. So what UWI has looked like for 75 years will not be the same that it's going to go for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So the creativity now in financing, which is where I would put the bulk of my attention, the financial future of our institution requires 100% attention, but that financial focus has to be geared on some vision of where we want these islands to go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Professor Carolyn Cooper, you have the final salvo.
Yes, well, I am on a mission now for us to change our name from the University of the West Indies. Time to get rid of Columbus's error. Columbus get lost and think he was in the West Indies. I know a lot of people say, Lord Carolyn gone and put on our foo-foo paths now, but really and truly, we need to rethink West Indies. What does West Indies mean? Yes, we have a history of the word, but is it time now to rebrand? I like the idea of a global Caribbean university. I don't think a soul is going to take me on. But I think that is one of the things we must look at, the identity. What does it mean to be a university of the West Indies when the West Indies is a dead concept? And I must say that in the late 70s, when I was teaching at a small Seventh-day Adventist college in North America, and the job market in the humanities was very bad, and I decided to go to law school. I applied to 10 law schools. I got into 7 of them, and including Georgetown, which is where I wanted to go. I didn't get into Harvard. I didn't get into University of Toronto, and I was on Yale's waiting list. And that same summer, I got a job at UWI, and I said, you know, before abandoning the profession, let me come home. And I have never regretted coming back home to teach at the University of the West Indies. It has been an enriching experience. Every now and then I meet students who tell me how much they enjoyed my classes. Just this year, I met somebody at the Ligani Art Festival, and she said, Professor Cooper, I did an essay for you, and you told me that reading it was like swimming because it was so much confusion that I had to be working through. She just laughed. She said, and when she thought about it, she understood what I meant. And so you have had an opportunity to contribute to the development of Caribbean students. And one of my other students recently published a book. You know, she asked me to write one of the blurbs. I was so honored to know that this young woman that I taught so long ago still felt that my opinion of her book was valuable. And so for me, the University of the West Indies, hopefully the name will change, it has been an institution that has fostered Caribbean development. It has fostered a sense of regional identity. It's just a pity, as Rupert said, that we have become so fractured that everybody is defending their national interests. But we really need to think of the mission of the university as one that would give us a sense of who we are as Caribbean people, not just as Jamaicans, Trinidadians, and so on. And I just end with George Lamin. In The Pleasures of Exile, he wrote about going to the UK and finding his West Indian identity there. Because he said, you know, you come to England as small islanders from different little islands, and then suddenly in England, you discover that you're part of a larger grouping. And that sense of regional identity is something that I believe our university has to continue to foster for the next 75 years.
Thank you so much. Ending on the note that we began on, the importance of identity. So thank you so much to our panelists this afternoon. That's not the end of it. I am opening the floor and the cyberspace to questions. We have the first question. There is someone going to help with the moving the mic?
Winsome Hudson online would like Dr. Harris to share a little more about what is involved in librarianship.
Sasikia, she set you up for that. All of you should know that Winsome Hudson is our former national librarian. But that's a good question. It's a very good question, actually.
Yes, it is. A question I asked many years ago and joked with my friends. So what is it you're going to study in librarianship at the university? Well, there is so much to librarianship. Where do I begin, Miss Stubbs? It is an area that can launch you into any other area. In fact, my neighbor asked me just a couple days ago to look at an assignment for her daughter. She wasn't understanding what was required. And so my first response was, this is a little girl. What kind of big assignment is this? And then I caught myself and I said, well, when I was going to school, all we had was the library and our little encyclopedia, and we would all go to the library, go check the encyclopedia to see what was there. But now, there is the internet, there is just so much at the fingertips of these children. So no doubt the teachers have to be very creative in the assignments to ensure that they are not just going to go to the internet and get something. And then I said, I need to have another conversation with my neighbor, because although I gave them an outline as to what to do, my thought was, how is this child going to learn critical skills? This is needed, how to research. Because if mom keeps helping and getting the neighbor to help, how is she going to learn? Yes, she'll get good grades. And so that is the foundation of library and information studies, a very key foundation. It helps you to think critically. You can find pretty much anything that you want. And that is very important. Critical thinking is very important, especially if you're going to be a graduate of any institution. Critical thinking is important. You must be able to think critically, find information, and evaluate that information to ensure it is credible, relevant, and authoritative. So that in and of itself is key. That's a very important key in librarianship.
I myself like to think, I don't use the term librarian anymore, just in terms of changing my own thinking. A librarian to me is an information specialist. That is the new, well, it's not a new term, but it is the term that I use, because all of the factors that you have mentioned, Sasika, the critical thinking, knowing where to look for information, making sure the information is what is required and it is what is credible. So we need to, and I think a lot of us really generally need to change our thinking in how we think of libraries and librarians, because the library is now not just the place with the dusty books. It is your center of information.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. Dr. Livingston White.
I just wanted to acknowledge the role that librarians play in a research scholar's life when you have your publications to work on. And I remember when Yvette Rowe and I were doing the book, still on air, that you published, the UWI Press, we were at the National Library for a period of time, searching through their West Indies collection and looking through different, collections to find information on the early years of television production. Because guess what? Many of these TV shows, they weren't existing in the format that they were produced in. They were damaged, they were destroyed.
Right,
so we literally had to rely on the written work, and we were looking at the Gleaner, old issues of the Gleaner, at the TV guides to find out what shows were produced. And we did a search and found 300 local television productions done since, JBC TV started in 1963. Okay. That would not have been possible if we didn't have the help of the librarians who understood our assignment, the book that we were writing, and who would find information and say to us, would this help?
Understand it
so
better
I see
than
Bernadette
you,
Worrell, who is here now, and she was at the National Library when we did the research for that book. Winsome Hudson was the National Librarian at the time.
Wonderful.
And you just had to acknowledge the work of the librarians who would help you to search for information for the research that you're doing.
And we all know the referencing in your publication is a
librarians
element.
again.
Thank you.
And you certainly would not expect me to end there about my profession, what's in librarianship. That's just the foundation. Yes, so for those who don't know who a librarian is, and I often get the question, so why a young person like you would want to become a librarian? And I'm like, I'm not that young, I just look young. And I have to tell them what it is, what is involved. So, a little more on librarianship. There are a number of areas that is in this very important profession. There is a teaching aspect. Teaching of research and information skills. Teaching how to read, how to write, how to find information. There is a technology component as well, and people often think, with the internet, libraries are irrelevant. And I say to people, this internet that you go to find what you need. It's actually a library. Because if you do a right click and you look at the metadata, that metadata there is provided by somebody trained in the area. Right? And metadata is data about data. So there is that aspect. And back when I was in cataloging, I almost always had to tell somebody what cataloging is. Well, I'm so happy they have a new word for it now, metadata.
Yes. But it centers on information.
Yes.
Information.
And there is a technology component. So again, people would be like, oh, so you read a lot of books? I'm like, yes, I do, and other things. There is a technology component. So you can branch out into becoming a systems librarian. This is where you'll be responsible for various software enabling a library online, enabling you to access all of that you would like to at your fingertips. And so this very technology that we are so heavily involved in is one of the reasons people think that libraries are irrelevant, because it is now in a new form, in a technology form. And so sometimes people don't make the connection. So there is a systems aspect. There is the reader's advisory aspect. There is the registrar aspect. So I have had friends who are now registrars in various areas because of the information handling skills. Yes.
All right, as you had said at the beginning, it really does lead into a
Yes.
very varying paths, career paths, as you have just said.
And there is a special collections aspect of librarianship. And what else is in librarianship? Public service. Yes, Ms. Stubbs, thank you. And there is the conservation and preservation aspect of librarianship as well.
Wonderful. A fitting description during this Sasika, you cannot monopolize the thing. I'm sure other people
my profession.
We are well aware of that, and I've given you credence because it's Library Week, but we have to allow some of our other participants to address our panelists if they wish. Are there any other questions from the floor? Jessica, there's one here.
Hi, afternoon, colleagues. I want to hear a little bit about your writing journey and kind of any tips about, that whole grueling process, to create a publication. We've heard about the research and your passion, but the actual writing up now and creating these published works.
Who are you addressing that to?
Anyone who wants to answer about, your writing journey, how you do it, how do you get over blocks, that kind of thing, because this publish or perish kind of environment that we're in, there is this pressure, and how do you do it?
Professor Rupert Lewis looks he's going to address that one.
Yeah, given the rigors of work, interfacing with students, interfacing with clients, time management becomes important, and little blocks of time do add up. So making notes of ideas as they come to you in whatever place, even if you're driving, you can stop at the stoplight and remember something, a flash comes to you, because you don't know when these insights will come to you, and it could be part of the beginning of a particular project. However, you do need the fellowship sabbatical time to get work done. So you're combining the small bits of time that you squeeze out whilst working, but you also need some downtime when this is what you're focusing on. So it's a combination of the two things. So sabbatical, which you only get every 7 years, and which is under severe scrutiny. And I suggest that don't let anybody take away your sabbatical. That must be a non-negotiable. Fellowships also, American universities, particularly the Ivy Leagues, are more fortunate in that you can get funding for your material. And you have publishers out there waiting on you, and they don't exist in the kind of delicate financial balance which I know our institution faces. But you have to have the will to write, because it's easy to do the routine things. But you really have to, if it's an hour a day, early in the morning, that is the basis on which you can build a writing habit.
And that is why several authors will tell you, it took me 5 years to get this out. It took me 10 years to get this out, just because it's stealing those snippets of time, but also taking the dedicated time. Thank you, Professor.
Indeed, I have found that to be so. Yes, so. And what is also helpful is going to writing with a different mindset. Don't think that writing is work. Let it be part of something that you enjoy. See it as something you enjoy. So even for me now, it is a struggle to separate, because I write, like you say, all the time. I always have my phone nearby, and as soon as a thought comes, I write it down, because the paper thing doesn't work for me now. Neither in the past. I always have my phone writing away as the thoughts come. So yes, it has to be a daily activity, a habit. And so whenever the thoughts come, I write all the time. And so I normally have a number of things I'm working on, because sometimes I'll go to my desk saying, okay, I am going to work on this trends and issues paper. And then when I get to the desk, I have no ideas for that. I get ideas for something else. And I do that something else. So having something, you need to choose your medium that is most convenient to you, for you to jot down your ideas as they come. And yes, that time, that dedicated time is important. And sabbatical, yes, comes everywhere. 6 years, it is so far off. So 7. So use your other leave. Use your vacation leave, use your study leave, whatever other leave is there, and I know you may be thinking, oh, vacation leave, yes, vacation. Because the attitude towards research has to be different. It's not work. It is part of what you do every day. So even the daily things you do at work, you can research and write on them. So approach research with a different mindset. It's not work, it's contributing to the big thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. That answers it for you, Jessica. Thank you.
And so,
there's a question. Oh, Professor Caroline had a chime in.
Well, Rupert said it for me, so I don't need to add anything really. Just to say discipline is important. I tell my colleagues who are struggling with writing PhD thesis, one cocoa full basket, one paragraph done thesis. So, sometimes you look at it as a long journey and it's a whole heap of stuff to write. But if you just do it little, you will finish.
Absolutely.
Well, to add one idea to that I haven't heard so far is to have a writing group. Get together with people. The body system does work. They will hold you accountable. So, you block the time, and you know that during that time you have to go to that group and do some writing. That has helped, and that has worked for some persons.
And I personally have had an author who says she gets up at 5 o'clock and her writing time is 5 to 7. She can't get up from her desk. That is her time to write. So that is how she has managed to get it done. So Thank you so much for those contributions. Was there another question from the audience? One more here, thank you.
On a lighter note, Winsome Hudson is asking Professor Cooper if the West Indies is really a dead concept. Who is she then?
It says if it is, then a who me be. Comment on the YouTube feed.
No, I'm Jamaican first and Caribbean next. I do not hug up this West Indian foolishness. So my identity is not mixed up in Christopher Columbus's error. And that's not a light note, you know, it's a serious note. How many West Indian institutions we still have? If you think about it. How many institutions are calling themselves West Indian these days? Not too many. And we can't be afraid of making change.
Yes, change is the only constant as human beings.
So in sum, I am still who I am with or without the label West India.
Wonderful. Well, we're coming up on the 4 o'clock hour. So on that note, I would like to thank everyone for their participation this afternoon. Thank you all for joining in. Please continue to celebrate Library Open Week 2023 and have a good afternoon, all of you.
Good afternoon. I have some goodies. I'm going to call Dr. Carr here and hand over an item, show our appreciation for our moderator, Ms. Randall. And as we get on that, Professor Cooper, yours will be coming.
Yes, man, I have no doubt. Physical distance is not going to stop me from being included. I know me, but I don't know.
You agreed to do this. You know, when I think the staff were really just trying to work through this whole thing of a conversation. Who is the best person? You know, and you came to the table, and we are so happy because I think having understanding of research and the process and just being able to just liaise with the team here and the authors, I think this is very, very good. Thank you so much.
It is simply a continuation.
Beautiful, beautiful.
You were pulling me out of myself and me becoming what I never knew I could be, operating within the Sorry. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Ms. Stubbs to come forward to hand to our presenters, Dr. Livingston and Professor Rupert Lewis. Ms. Stubbs, please come.
No, thank you. So I got I got two of the gentlemen. Oh, so Professor Lewis.
Thank you.
Two Professors Lewis and Dr. Livingston White. Thank you so much. I just wish I had more time to keep listening, but thank you.
I'm going to call our Deputy Campus Librarian, Mrs. Marshall, to give Dr. Livingston and Dr. Harris. No, I'm sorry, Stanley. Oh, Stanley, Griffin, sorry, my bad, Stanley.
I'm so happy to be handing to both of you. We are cohorts, we are contemporaries. The both of you are very inspiring with the work that you do, and I'm happy to see your cohort represented here. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much again. But before I'm asked to give the vote of thanks, I'm going to ask you to sing happy birthday to Dr. Stanley Griffin. You couldn't get away. So after two, 1, 2, 3, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Stanley. Happy birthday to you.
Miss Lou Bertrand. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you, dear Stanley. Happy birthday. Sing the chorus. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you, dear. Happy birthday.
Thank you again. I think this can become a ritual as a part of our library week. It was quite interesting, and I want to say, before I get into the script in front of me here, I want to thank everybody again. We were a bit uncertain about this afternoon because of the weather, and I must say thank you very much. As they say, battling the weather that started from 2 days ago. But let me say, ladies and gentlemen, with all protocol observed, I wish you all a good afternoon. First, I want to thank our distinguished participants this afternoon who came out despite the weather. We hear some lightning and thunder outside and flooding on the streets. To participate in an interesting, important conversation, Professor Caroline Cooper, Dr. Sasika Harris, Dr. Livingston White, Dr. Stanley Griffin, and Professor Rupert Lewis. I remembered you when I was an undergrad and a postgrad. Your insights, story, your observations, your comments, all encompass your lived journey. And many of us in here are scholars, are going to be scholars, and will continue to be scholars, because even in retirement, I know you're still actually working on something. So you have motivated us. Okay? I'd like to thank, of course, our campus librarian, and once again say special thanks to her brainchild for this particular week. When she came back, she brought the Library Week and celebration of books. I will still continue to do it, especially in her retirement year. I'm sorry. So she deserved a trophy, and we're planning one to get to her, all right? And again, I would like to thank the team. The team this year in our 75th anniversary was the largest possible team that worked together, and their names are so wide, I would want to get into it, but we are going to have a special thing for them also. So I just want to keep thanking them, as we have 2 other events coming up. We have tomorrow our symposium, and we're launching our Preservation Awareness Week nationally this year and also regional. And we have papers coming as far from Africa. So we have gone very wide in our field. So I want to also thank those individuals who have worked and continue to work. And I now express my deepest appreciation to everybody who has attended and all who have participated. Thank you and good afternoon.